a text message from one of the Lynn participants, one of my team members on one of the teams I'm on, and this is what it read. She said, "Hi, Pat, hope you are feeling well. Any test results yet? Let me know if you need anything. I lead," and then she names the program, at one of the local schools, so I will be in the area and would be happy to drop anything off. I have never met this team member in person, but she was willing, outside of Lynn, but she was willing to come over and help to make sure that I was doing okay. And what I thought about when I was so in awe that she made this offer, not because of who she is, because that is her. That is exactly who she is. And by the way, she is Angel, one of our team members here. And that is Angel. But what I thought about was, I said, yes, this is it. When you see that one of your team members is down and becomes like a weak link, and weakness could be overburdened with activities, it could be not feeling well, it could be maybe going through something personal, it could be not having the skill sets to do the task in front of them. What this team member did was she came in and said, let me strengthen her because she's feeling weaker. And then by doing so, we all become strengthened and our team becomes strengthened because we're working on projects together. So I just thought that she exemplified what it means to really put into action and demonstrate a working knowledge of how teams work. So the crab concept is gone. No crab concept. It's just one is down, let me come beside her, lift her up, and then we all benefit together. So I just want, if everybody would take a second, please, and applaud Angel for the great work that she did when she thought one of her team members was really, really sick and down. And I encourage you, Thursday, start thinking who in your team actually is exemplifying what a positive, effective team is all about and is displaying that kind of team membership. So who's next? Who's going to be next Thursday? So we'll start each session out with that. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Steph.
Of course. Thank you, Pat. And awesome to call that out. Thank you, Angel, for just being you. So yeah, it's hard to jump off that and talk about conflict, right? Like what? But ultimately, that's what it boils down to. Conflict gets ironed out easily. It gets worked through quickly when you have strong, effective teams that have trust and care and compassion for each other. So thank you for kicking us off with that. So today we are going to jump into, oh my gosh, I have so many PowerPoints open. Hold on. There we go. So the second half of what we started last week. So how to successfully navigate difficult conversations. And today we're going to have some time to review your TKI results. So pull those up in your email from Vicki if you can. But as a reminder, our objectives are going to be to better understand your own approaches when faced with these situations, and then name and practice some strategies for maintaining and creating safety. So I knew there was another announcement I didn't put in Canvas, but I put a stack of Crucial Conversations textbooks, so they're red, for the LEND cohort members in the LEND Lounge. So these are the chapters in that text. Number one, if you're on site and you can grab one, please do so. And then just shoot me a text or an email that you received it so I can keep a list of who all has received their books. If you know you're not going to be on site, we'll get it mailed to you. Email me that as well. And we'll get these organized and get them emailed to you in the next few weeks. I'm sorry, not emailed, but mailed to your home in the next few weeks, because I apologize. We must have not had them at the beginning of the year to put in your orientation bag. And we thought we might be in person. Let's be honest, we had hoped. So again, last week we talked about chapters 1 through 5, and we kind of ended with some things. And then today we're going to talk about safety, exploring others' paths, and really the action items that we can do in these conversations. But first, we are going to do some Kahooting. So I'm going to stop share there, bring up one of my Kahoots. And so get out your smartphone or go to kahoot.it on your phone. And then, so on your phone, it would be www.kahoot.it. Or if you have the app, you can just plug in the game pin. Or you can pick up your camera and just hover over the QR code there, and it should take you straight to it. You don't have to put in your actual name. You can just put in a nickname. Thanks, Ellie. I know that's a nickname. Thanks, Kim. James is on, Kelsey's on. Thanks, Paul. Great, as folks are joining, I'll just set this up. These are just some questions to summarize and remind us what we talked about last week. And for those of you that may not have been able to be here, it'll be a quick overview of what you had missed. Awesome, we'll give everybody another minute. We're close to getting almost everybody on. And if you want to just sit back and watch, you're totally fine to do that too. That's the nice part about Kahoot. You don't have to play and you can still follow along with the questions. The game pin will remain in the screen once we start as well too. So, all right. Well, I am going to go forward and start the questions. So what makes a conversation crucial? Red is opposing opinions, strong emotions, high conflict. Orange, high stakes, opposing opinions, strong emotions. Blue, strong emotions, opposing opinions, mean comments. Green, strong emotions, high stakes, and miscommunication. So if you remember last week, we had the triangle.
Like, do you mean that, like, there's miscommunication, you need to clear it up, or miscommunication as, like, you're miscommunicating with the person you're that
was a wrong answer, actually. So miscommunication was a wrong answer. The right answer were these three things on the triangle. High stakes, so people felt value in the topic. Opposing opinions, they disagreed about it, but they also were emotionally drawn to the topic. So the orange was the correct one. So those are the three areas that make it a crucial conversation. Back to that triangle we saw last week. Oh, and oh, well, that was just a picture, but I put in some GIFs too, because now you can do GIFs and that's super fun in Kahoot. Here's, oh, Sam looks like she's the leader on the board, Elo second, and James third. I'm going to start the next question. The TKI conflict modes include red, confrontational, compromising, avoiding. Yellow, collaborating, masking, avoiding. Blue, competing, compromising, silencing. Green, compromising, collaborating, competing. A lot of C words. Oh, yay, good. The majority of you all got it right. So it's the compromising, collaborating, competing. And then we also had avoiding and accommodating, right? So, all right, we're going to move to the next question and see who's, oh, Sam's still on the leaderboard and Julie has moved on up to third. All right. Unhealthy motives of dialogue are red, being right, getting results. Orange, avoiding conflict and winning. Blue, saving face, building relationships. And green, learning the truth, producing results. What are the unhealthy motives? Right on. Unhealthy motives in that list would be avoiding conflict or winning. But rather, we want to learn the truth, produce results, build relationships. Those are more of the healthy motives. Awesome. Elo, Julie, and Laura, leaderboard. Question 4 of 5. Fight or flight response can also be called red is neural hijacking, orange is amygdala trauma, Blue is neocortex complication, or green, my favorite answer, hormonal problems. Right on, neural hijacking. That's what we talked about last week with Dan Goleman, the father of emotional intelligence, talks about the fight or flight response is hijacking our neurons. And oh, Laura's on fire somehow. She's got this thing by her name. That's fun. And Abby's taken over. And here we're going into our final question. The quote, what skills? We talked last week about what skills and how skills are to red, talk tentatively and tell your story. Orange, tell your story, ask for others' paths and encourage testing. Blue, share your facts, tell your story, ask for others' paths. Green, ask for others' paths and encourage testing. This one was harder because I mixed the what and the how skills, but yes, the blue group, share your facts, tell your story, ask for others' paths. So remember, it's the acronym STATE, so STA. And let's see. All right, who's on the podium? Elo. Damn. Star shine on Abby. Good job, Abby. Quick fingers. Runners up, Courtney and Jason. Awesome, awesome.
Wow.
Thanks for playing, guys. Hopefully that jogged your memory on what we talked about last time. And we're going to jump back into the slide deck. I feel like I missed some questions in the, let's see. Kim asked, does everyone get one, Steph? And I'm assuming you mean a book. Is that right, Kim? Sorry, I can't see you. If you can come off mute.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So yes, everybody in the LEN cohort, we have enough copies for all 24 of you. All right. So as a reminder, you all know everything, all of this already. You learned it in kindergarten. And we already reviewed the crucial conversation components, opposing opinions, strong emotions, high stakes. Remember these questions we talked about that you can remind yourself, print them out, review them, stick them in your desk. What bad results do you want? What good results are you not able to get to? What problems are coming up as patterns? And what do people often complain about? Just a reminder, this is the Thomas Kilmann modes along the different axes of cooperativeness and assertiveness. And at this point, I want us to spend a little time with your own materials. And I apologize to our non-LEN cohort members that you don't have these, but I wanted to give you guys a few minutes in class to review your results and just make notes about what you're reading and if it's accurate about yourself, if it seems off. One of the things we always identify is that people are one way at work or in school and another way at home with their loved ones. So just kind of read through it if you haven't already and make some notes, and we'll come back and kind of share some of your insights. And for our social workers and clinical counselors, take a quick bio break or get some coffee. So we'll be back at, let's see, 1:30. about 1 minute left. And if Marta, if you're still on, could you drop the link back in? I don't know if it'll let me cut and paste out of the, let me see. No, never mind, I can pull it up and then drop it back in. There's the link, folks. Hopefully that works. All right, well, we'll come all back together now. Hopefully you were able to review your results and grab your coffee or water or tea. Thanks for coming back on video if you can. So who wants to kick us off? What did you learn about your conflict resolution mode and style?
I'll start it off. I was a little questioning how times change, what is acceptable or what is considered assertive and what's not. And the reason is because I guess the questions I answered about the avoiding, it kind of is influenced by where I am in life.
Sure.
And to me, it is an assertive form because it's making the decision not to either waste time on you know, I guess what I'm saying is conserving where my energy goes and my focus goes. But then the other piece was that it is a management style as well. Managers from the director levels up to the C-suite. If there are certain emails that come that may not be, well, let's just say there's an avoiding, there's the emails are not responded to. And that sometimes is a form of responding, even though I kept thinking, so is this avoiding or is this making the decision not to respond because whatever was said was inappropriate or whatever? And then certainly at the C-suite level, if there is, or corporate level, if there are emails or statements that are said that are, it's not even on the plane they're operating on, oftentimes they don't respond to it. So I'm confused. And I guess I'm wondering, does the testing take into consideration social and cultural changes, or is it just that avoiding is not assertive, period?
That's a really good question. And I would say it's not sensitive enough to take in social and cultural changes. Okay. It's really looking at what is the algorithm based on which you respond to the scenarios. But I think we've heard this almost every year. We've done this in that people reflect back and say, oh, at a different point in my life, I probably would have come out differently. And I think that that's really helpful because we talked about last week, you can get training and do certain things. And like you're saying, Pat, you've gotten to a place where you're mindful about conserving your energy. And Risha's putting in the chat box, she's a big pick your battles kind of person. And maybe that is looked at as avoiding, but if it's not a battle, she has the availability, you know, psychological wherewithal, time, you know, sleep last night, then yeah, it probably is, you know, avoiding it. I think there's the other piece too, is that you brought up emails. There's a huge component that has turned virtual now. And we don't just get the luxury of saying, okay, let's take this out of email and meet in person, right? We might have to take it out of email and jump on a Zoom call or a phone call. And that's still, the research supports that that's not the best ways of navigating conflict, right? People ask that all the time when, you know, email questions would come up and say, oh, I don't know what that tone was in that email. What should I do? And it's like, well, really, we should try to get into a place where we can meet with that person one-on-one in person. That's not an option anymore. And the way that the global market is moving, even in healthcare, we're working with people that are in different time zones. And it's not ever feasible to sometimes meet some of the people on our teams in person. So I think just where I'm thinking in this, the takeaway is, if at all possible, when you're in a manager or leader role and you see things coming through that aren't appropriate in email, it may appear to some people that you're avoiding. However, in my perspective would be to always praise in public and discuss or punish in private. And if that means that you might need to pull aside the person who is maybe being inappropriate, then you do that. But I still always recommend letting the other people know that something's being addressed, right? You don't have to give the details, but just at least letting them know so it doesn't appear as though you're just avoiding and ignoring it altogether. But thank you for kicking us off, Pat. It's really helpful and insightful. I think I'm missing things that are going on in the chat box. So Jen, you wanna, or Courtney? By who you are with and what setting you're in.
Yeah, I was just saying that we get a lot of folks that will say, oh, well, it's kind of different for me, whether I'm in a personal setting or in a professional setting or with, you know, friends versus family versus colleagues, you know, all those sort of things. So it's very contextual based on like the specific situation. And I think that is the tie-in with the emotional intelligence pieces of being aware of a lot of those contextual things that you have to take into consideration when identifying what the best mode is for that particular situation.
Courtney, I apologize because I know you just took a bite, but I think it is helpful when you're in these multiple roles as a student, and I don't know if you could speak to what you mean by, you know, in your job that you've had for a number of years versus being a student, and what that kind of shook out in your results maybe too.
Yeah, I think it's more like, I guess, kind of like the power that you hold. Like if I was in a supervisor role, I would feel more confident bringing things up and kind of addressing concerns. Whereas if I'm a trainee and something comes up, I don't want to necessarily tell my supervisor or wait for, I just kind of would let her address something or him. So yeah, I think it's more of like I was answering the questions and I didn't know, am I answering right now, like in my training, or who I think I'll be when I have a job? I don't know. So yeah.
Do you feel like the responses, and this just doesn't have to be for Courtney, but do you feel like the responses and the results you got are fairly accurate for you? Or was anybody surprised by what their results said? Kim is shaking her head like she wasn't surprised.
I think mine were pretty accurate. So I had a tie between accommodating and compromising. And I think the accommodating piece, I think I kind of pigeonholed myself into this graduate student role where like in grad school, I'm not trying to rock the boat. I'm just trying to graduate and get my PhD one way or another. And kind of listening to my professors and my advisors so I can see how I'm accommodating in that way, but then compromising because I'm working with clients and always trying to find that happy medium. I was surprised about the competing. That was my lowest one, but I also thought about it, and I never been in situations where it's life or death or been in those emergency type of situations, which is why I think I scored lower, because I just didn't have experience in that realm. But also if it was life or death, I feel like I would step up into that role. I just feel that lack of experience kind of lowered my score there.
Or you haven't had those experiences maybe where you have that really high stakes, strong emotions type of situation, because you have been in that learner role. And kind of back to what you and Courtney have been talking about, there is that power differential. And that's why we spend so much time infusing, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion work into the LEN program as well, because no matter what, you have that power differential. And like Courtney alluded to, she had the choice, right? She had the privilege to say, oh, I'm not going to engage in this conflict or whatnot. Some people don't have that choice because of their roles. Or some people, you know, don't have that privilege. And so when we think about the workforce, the healthcare field, the education field, it's still predominantly white led. And especially even in our institution, it's predominantly white male led still. So think about who has the privilege to make those choices, to say, oh, I'm not going to email them back, or I'm not going to address this. And it feels that way now as a student, but it's going to feel that way your first few years in your careers for some of you as well. So absolutely, Jason, and for non-disabled people versus those who identify with disabilities, absolutely. So Elizabeth, the survey I'm talking about, you took it when you were LEN trainee. It was the Thomas Kilman instrument. So these were the results that they got individually, the LEN cohort members. But last week there was a survey that was free at the beginning of the slide deck. And hopefully Marta sent that out.
I think going into
Steph?
that, for me, I'm pretty accommodating, and I tend to
Mhm.
have avoidance things because I think Meanan probably was overly assertive when I was younger in some ways, but a lot of the systems too tell people with disabilities just to do what I say, you know, and that your perception of that then affects it, because especially when, you know, I mean, in some ways it's good that there's things that follow you, so people, but also it then becomes a record that goes follow you through all of it, because it's, you have that permanent documentation of sort of things. And I think also because of it being from such a young age, in some ways it doesn't actually change between most groups. The only people I'm different with, who I feel more comfortable with, is my parents, because for most people I don't, you know, and I don't have that sort of level of comfort with anybody sort of things, because things had sort of, you know, been sort of in a tumultuous state of, you know, everybody's always perceiving or seeing something wrong with my behavior, you know, and not that I was perfect or I didn't have anything wrong with my behavior at some points, but it's.
And I love this. So Jason, this is taking us to a place where I always talk about it in behavioral therapy with families. And it's really based out of the marriage and family therapy literature. But it's for every one conflict or confrontation, it takes between 4 and 10 positive exchanges to outweigh that. And that's kind of what you're getting at here, right? Like if you are inundated with positive exchanges or trusting relationships like you have with your parents, it's going to be much easier to sail, you know, problematic times than if the only experience you've had with another individual or another group has been difficulties, right? And so that's why we emphasize, just like what Pat introduced today, how do we build up teams and call out each other and praise in public? Some people don't like that, so I will say that. Make sure that you know that people like to be praised in public, because I've only met 1 or 2 colleagues, but they get mortified. But I think that you're right. We have to outweigh and balance those things, and it takes far more trusting and positive experiences to outweigh even one negative experience. And we all have that. It's just human nature. We might get one little criticism from our supervisor, and 99% is perfect, and we only focus on the negative thing. It's just human nature. Pat, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say also with Megan that I scored low on the competing too. But when I looked at that, I'm not at a stage where I've kind of done it. And so I tend to relinquish to let other people do. So I'm probably less competing. But I wanted to share one thing, and it's more from a diversity perspective. And that was that I probably am also influenced about not being competing. I was well into my late 40s, maybe early 50s, when I realized that something from my childhood was still directing my behavior and my thoughts. And that was that I saw myself one day, we were at an elevator, and I was raised from the time I was a child that if you're at an elevator, that we were to let all of the white people on first, and then we get on. And I was in like late 40s, early 50s, and I was actually on the job, and I was doing that. And so that didn't I actually had to make an effort to be more assertive and to not do that, to get on the elevator without, pushing people aside and pushing them off the elevator and getting on, but to kind of turn that way of thinking. But what I realized that day was it didn't just influence my behavior, it like physically, but it also influenced when I was in meetings. I would relinquish to let other thoughts, or I would say, yes, those thoughts are yes, better than mine. And so I actually have had to work on that for the last, I can't tell you how many decades, because that was so ingrained in me. And I kept thinking, I bet some of this is popping up in some of my answers, because I tried to answer instantaneously without, so it would be my gut feeling, but that did influence me. So I don't know why I thought maybe I should share it.
Oh, thank you. And we all have those things. You're exactly right. Thank you so much for sharing. Psychologists like to call them core beliefs. And you found your core belief right there in that moment at the elevator. And that was, so insightful. And that's what we have to do. Honestly, that's why Jen and I love running this program. I can't tell you how many times people have come to us with their insights. And we're like, yeah. And you know what? Talking about that with a therapist would really help, because therapy is awesome. But thank you for sharing, Pat. I really appreciate it. Well, great. Well, we're going to jump back into the slide deck, and it stinks because then I can't see you all. I can only see a handful. So Julie, I can see you. So if you can make sure that everything's showing up okay, give me a thumbs up. Cool. Awesome. All right. So just as a reminder, last time we talked about how, while not in its extreme form, we don't necessarily see people respond completely in silence or, aggressively with true violence. We do have these instances. So I don't know if anybody paid attention this week and saw these, if you want to come off mute or put in the chat box. But I definitely experienced somewhere, I would say my husband and I are somewhere right around this red mark right here. We're definitely not in silence. We've done some therapy, so we know how to tone it down, but we have this whiteboard in our house, and it's our house management board, and it's where we write our nanny notes, and it's where we write each other notes. And I'm like, John, bro, like the light bulbs, they've been on your list to replace for a while. And so there was a little bit of this area over the weekend. So I don't know if anybody else noticed some silence or violence or anywhere in between in their lives, and would feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, I was in the car the other day, and I was with another person, and I am definitely more of like the more violent type. So I get kind of more vocal and loud, and they were more on the silent type. So it felt definitely more one-sided. And then afterwards we kind of talked it out, and I actually sent them the link that we did this on. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I was like, I'm more on the violent side. I think you're definitely more on the silent side. So yeah, I think that those two combined is not a good combo sometimes.
Interesting insight, Maria. Yeah. It's kind of like whenever any of my friends would get married, I would make sure, like, did you talk to your spouse that you're about to marry about the love languages? Because you really need to know how to speak each other's love language. But it's like, okay, how do you handle conflict? Friend, partner, spouse, whoever. So yeah. Thanks for sharing. It looks like Pat and Jason both have their hands up. Oh no, Pat wants to bring her hand down. Go ahead, Jason.
I think that I tend to be probably, if I was in my natural state of not being societally influenced in some ways, I would probably be a little bit more violent, not like physically, but I tend to be loud and sort of say what I want to, and I don't mean I do care about people, but I think because of I think I've overcorrected in some ways, and one, feeling bad about how it makes people feel sometimes, but also not feeling always heard, or sort of usually getting the responsibility of the blame, even sometimes with just trying to assume what I need or something, of you're being difficult, or just you just need to understand or stuff. But I tend to be more silent because I don't see the point of it sometimes anyways, or I don't want to be seen as trying to be too difficult.
So spending a lot of that energy on how other people will receive that response from you. Absolutely. No, thank you for bringing up that point. Yeah. Shannon, go ahead.
I feel like I switch between silence and violence because I feel like in my professional life, I lean on the side of like silence, but in my personal life, I'm definitely lean on the side of violence. And I don't know, I'm like the youngest of 4 girls and we're all very close in age. So like, I feel like growing up, I had to like scream to get a word in edgewise, and it's still very similar. But my husband came from like a very quiet upbringing. And so like in our marriage, it's really funny because I've definitely grown in my ability to like not act right away and like be a little bit more like neutral when it comes to things, where like when we first got married, it was like kind of a culture shock for him that I would just be like, I would like scream at him to do something, not like scream, but I would be like aggressive about it. And like now I've come to a place of like being able to have adult conversations.
Absolutely. We replay all those scenarios from our childhood in our relationships in adulthood, whether it's with your spouse, your partner, your roommate. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Shannon. Yeah. You took me back to my old psychology 101 days and birth order, how important birth order is and what you become and who you are as a person. So very cool. All right. Well, we talked about getting everything out in a way that kind of what Shannon and Jason both alluded to is like, how can the other party be responsive to how I'm coming across? It can also be really important. And that's what we're going to talk about with the how steps. We talked last week about checking yourself for the facts versus the story, you know, kind of that, what's going on in my mind? Am I blowing this out of proportion? Am I telling myself something that I can challenge and kind of tapping into our role? If you're not familiar with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, it's really helpful to just Google some things. There's some really nice materials online. And if any of our psychology or social work friends are familiar with those and have some trusty ones that they use with patients or with themselves or with their family members and want to drop them in the chat box, that would be great. But again, this is the crux of it all. So the state skills, the what is the content. So we want to share our facts, describe and tell that story that we're telling ourselves, ask for the other person's paths. But how we do that is by talking tentatively and encouraging testing. And sometimes this how part feels like, gosh, am I kind of accommodating? Am I kind of being a pushover? But at the same time, remind ourselves that we're maintaining safety so we can get everything into the pool of shared meaning. And we talked about separating those facts from the stories, those 3 types of stories, and telling the rest of the story. And so these are some questions that we can always remind ourselves of in terms of what is this that I'm doing in the dynamic that is causing a problem, and being able to own that it's part of this relationship, or it's part of this pattern, or it's part of this group process, and I'm participating in that. And we talked last time, I think too, about, you know, we're asking yourself, why would this other person do this? They're smart, they're intelligent, or what should I do right now to even just inch closer to what I really want? Maybe I'm not going to get everything I want. Maybe we're going to have to compromise, but what can I do to move towards in that direction and out of this issue that I'm facing? Christy has her hand up. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm just reflecting a lot. This conflict aspect is making me, I've taken courses specifically on conflict in the past, and my results have changed drastically from when I first took them. But one of the biggest things that I think I learned that my previous boss taught me within this mastering my stories is to go to someone. Typically it was in person, is how it used to be, not through email because we can't read it well, but to go to that person in person. And the main sentence he always encouraged me to use is to help me understand. And because it makes it show that you are willing to be there and listen, and it doesn't start the conversation in any type of negative context. So that was like the most powerful intro to conversation that I feel like I ever learned, is help me understand.
Love it. Yep. Help me understand. Or like I said last week with my patient who I just adore, help me know. Help me know.
I have
what
a
you're
question on the other end though, because I'm
Yeah.
just, for a lot of times, I've in some ways learned these as I sort of, done some of it with my behavior, but then I overcorrected, and now it's always anytime something goes wrong, well, what did I do that made this, like, and then usually feeling like that, especially when sometimes like in the systems of like with disability, well, you just need to accommodate, you just need, it can sometimes be like, I'm trying as hard as I can to accommodate without like being able to do something I'm not like, so how is it that you can usually just because not like to be able to put up your voice a little bit, but not be
Yeah.
as defunct just because that's some
I
of
think
the.
I don't know that I'm going to answer your question
Sorry, I don't mean to
fully,
be
Jason, but I think it's such a powerful thought of how do we, and especially in the disability world, where we're not always putting the onus on the person with the disability, right? So we need to change the system. We need to move more towards neurodiversity being accepted and being celebrated in one regard. But in the kind of the personal place, that's where I always go back to, if anybody's ever watched Grey's Anatomy, you know that like Meredith Grey and Christina Yang were two characters, and they said, "You're my person," right? It's nice to have that other individual that is on your side, but also can help you see some things from more of an objective way, where you're really focusing on the subjective and how it felt to you. And but rather, if that's your parent, if that's your spouse, if that's a friend or colleague, who can you go to as your person that will be comfortable saying, you know what, Jason, I do think you're working really hard, and you did a great job in that scenario.
Way too emotional too, because they care so much about.
They care so much about it. So maybe not your parents particularly, but
I love
right,
that.
maybe
A lot of times they go
yeah.
into that parent sort of mode, understandably.
Defensive, yeah.
Like,
yeah,
because it's sort
but
of
finding that outlet, and that could be, for some people for a while, that's a therapist. For other people, it's a colleague. I think really is just so important to be able to have that, to debrief during situations that may be frustrating or confusing, or you tend to perseverate. We all perseverate to a certain degree. So
and then it could go me, not that I'm like, and I could probably mean again, there's definitely ways I could have done better in some of those situations, but it goes in, oh, it's better just not to bring this stuff up, because then people are going to see you as being difficult or not wanting to cooperate when you're just saying what may or may not. Well, I don't know. So it's I'm sorry, I don't mean to get
I think you're bringing up really good points that we all face. Sometimes it's on the front end, how do I prep for this, right? And how do I bounce these ideas off of other people to make sure that it's worthwhile to bring up? But also on the back end, you're doing a great job reflecting, like, okay, what could I have done better? What did I do well, and what could I have done better? That's what I always, what went well? Let's focus on that. What could I do better next time? And it never hurts to have that person that's going to be able to be a bit more diplomatic in that conversation. So you don't just get stuck spinning your wheels like a mouse on a wheel, but rather you're a mouse in a maze, right? You're working through it, not just in a circle. So we've talked about, I think last week we alluded to this, the share your facts. So you talk about your facts versus your opinions, and you're relying on what is actually being able to be seen and heard by others too. And kind of this talking tentatively. I've noticed that, or there's been 3 times that we've met about this. We agreed to this time, but now it's this time. So these are your facts. Telling your story. So I'm wondering if you're not, as invested in this project, right? That's the story I'm telling myself. If you're not putting in an effort, the story I'm telling myself is you don't really care. Or I'm wondering if something's going on at your house that's leading you to not be able to get this done. I'm wondering if you're not feeling well. So those are the kinds of things that allows you to kind of spoon feed. This was the story I'm telling myself. Then you bring it to, how do you see it? Am I right? What else am I missing about this situation? What are you thinking and feeling about this situation? And then this forces you, with using these state skills, this forces you to close your mouth at this point, right? S, share, T, tell, A, ask, and then it should be zip it, right? Because then now it's the other person's turn. And we really want them to challenge. You want to be challenged. You want to say, I want you to tell me what's going on. And like we've said, the how skills are avoiding absolutes, allowing others to share and not punishing them by being reactive, by turning away, by walking away, right? But, you know, two harsh examples. The fact of the matter is absolutes. That's, you know, putting judgment on things. Those are never going to get people to want to open up. So, you know, some things like maybe we could consider, and this is when you're already getting into that kind of brainstorming, exploring what are the solutions, what are the compromises or collaborations that could be discussed. And then always taking it back to the encouraging testing, which is just asking over and over again, and be sincere and ask, you know, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think, Shannon? I know we've kind of gotten to some action steps, but I still want to hear what you think about action step number 2, and get more information out. You'd be surprised when people feel comfortable, they will open up like, gosh, this really, like, I didn't realize that this pressed my buttons from a project I worked on, you know, 3 years ago. And that's why I'm getting stuck, because it didn't work before. And my fear is that it won't work now. Right. And you would be very surprised that people are willing to open up when you have that opportunity, that time and that space to get into all the meat. Again, reminder to learn to look. So what is it that's going on in your own emotions, your own physical responses? Is your belly getting tight? Do you have lip sweat? Do you have palm sweat? What is happening with your behaviors? Are you leaning in? Or are you leaning away? Right? Because we're not only looking for this in other people, but we're trying to be in the moment, mindful of what's happening in our own bodies. And this is really challenging because we want to be assumed to be competent and confident. And so we try to think too and act too quickly. Rather take the time to reflect on what's going on in your own body. I've had to learn this a lot because I'm just a very quick thinker. Like you'll notice that Jen and I kind of talk about how we're very different. She's much more quiet. She'll think about things for a long time. And I'm like, okay, this feels good. But I've had to stop and think, like, in these particular situations that get, you know, a little tricky and confrontational, like, okay, slow it down, take a deep breath, think through how I'm feeling and how that other person might be feeling and what am I seeing and how can we get to a better place of comfort and safety. So going back, we got to flush. We got to get rid of all that stuff that makes us feel unsafe. And we have to sometimes step out of the content and restore safety. And that could be, you know, getting more of what is going on with your story instead of let's problem solve how to fix this problem, right? Problem solving and trying to get it resolved, to me, is the content. To me, is we have to fix it. There's a problem. Let's talk about the problem. Let's rehash the problem. Rather, the context is the stories. We have to get into that context. We have to figure out what is happening in this scenario that is pushing somebody else's buttons, is pushing our buttons, and talk through that piece before we can go back to problem solving. So sometimes before we can even do that, we are so jazzed up, we are so keyed up and on edge that we have to take a break. And we can't even get into the conversation. And so I found this actually on social media, and this is Whitney Goodman, who's a licensed marriage family therapist. And she must have some social media, but I loved this image that she put up of just statements for when you need to take a break in a difficult conversation. And it's all the things that are going to help maintain safety, right? It seems like we're getting a little off track here. Can we take a break? But I want to come back to it. Or I really think this is important too, but right now I might not be in a place that I can think and say things clearly enough. So I want to take a break and come back. And so this kind of, for some people are like, well, isn't this avoiding? And it's like, no, this is taking a break because your body needs a break. Your brain needs a break. And you can stop and think and maybe take a sleep on it, right? I always laugh when, again, going back to when people get married and they always say, don't go to bed mad. I'm like, hell no, I'm going to bed at 7. This will be so much better in the morning, right? Like I will go to bed mad. I have no problem going to bed mad because I know once I sleep it off, I'm going to be in a much clearer headspace in the morning. So take a break, Kelly, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I love using that. My boyfriend and I are in a long distance relationship, and we will text and get in a fight, and we'll always just be like, take a break and I'll call you in an hour. And like everything is 10 times better. So it's one of my favorites.
Exactly, right? And I'll be honest with you, one of the best, most fantastic skills that I teach kids in behavior therapy is to ask for a break, because we all need a break. And our society is so fast paced that we assume we just have to go all the time. And that's not fair to us as people. Like, we need a break. So nonetheless, I really like this.
I will say,
go ahead.
This is one of the hardest things with military at times when you're away. Because if you're deployed, you don't have that opportunity and you don't know when you're going to have a chance to talk again. So I've personally been through it and have seen several friends and family, in their families who struggle, because you can't say, I'll talk to you in an hour, I'll talk to you in a day. It's I'll talk to you the next time I actually have communication availability.
Oh my gosh, Nicoletta, that is such a good point. And that's why I feel like there's so much work that should go into our military families, particularly, because think about all that unmet need and those emotions that bottle up over time when the spouse is deployed. And then that re-entry is a real huge undertaking emotionally for everyone.
Gigantic. And I feel so bad because there's so few resources and so limited things to actually provide to both the service member and their family to help them through it.
Yep. Having family members who have been in the Air Force, I've heard and lived it alongside of them. Absolutely. And I think this is your call to action. You can get your student loans paid back by the military. You go into the military and you support families. Great gig. I know we had a couple hands raised. So go. I think, Sam, did you have your hand raised?
I did, but Nicoletta's story was so good.
Well,
I would just, so you said the one thing you teach kids is to like advocate for themselves to take a break. And I had the sweetest little 7-year-old in our audio booth raise his hand and say, I need a break. This is really overwhelming. And I just thought, I need that skill. I really need that skill.
Yes.
You got it more than I do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so hard. And it's okay. Sometimes I'll say to my husband, like, I can't right now. And I put it in my hand, right? Like my behaviors are, I put it in my hand and I go to my bed and I curl in the fetal position and I get under the covers, right? Because that's what feels good. And then I take some deep breaths and then we can re-engage, right? But sometimes you really do need to take that break. Jason, did you have your hand or are you good?
Yeah, I did. I did. And I think this is really good. I like that also sort of putting it on sort of what you need instead, especially like I really want to finish this conversation when I'm in because I did have some of that recently where there was some confusions of services I was getting and I got sort of flustered a little bit and I tried to stay calm, but I got it. And they're like, you're making me feel uncomfortable. I need to get off. Like, and it made me, and I felt bad for one, making him feel uncomfortable because I was really trying to keep a level tone, but I didn't want to. I was feeling a little bit like this keeps, and then I felt really bad. And I thought like, oh my God, I'm going to get in trouble because I'm misbehaving. Like, and just so like,
no, but look, and I wish I could highlight, we.
And that's what I think.
And that's what you're pointing out is that it's not, you're not saying you're making me feel this way. You're saying I'm feeling frustrated.
And I feel bad for making that, like that I was, and I did try to regulate and not like really raise my voice, but I was like, I can't not feel.
But it's not you, it's the dynamic, it's the scenario, it's the situation, right?
I don't want to say I have no ownership either and that I didn't have any responsibility. Sorry.
But to share responsibility, I think, is also important in these scenarios. Yep.
Of course.
Can I also say it's very difficult to be married to a psychiatrist who I try to say I need a break and he immediately is like, well, let's talk about your feelings and let's delve into this more. And I'm like, I'm going to go hide in our bedroom and you're going to leave me
alone for an hour and then we can dive into my.
No offense to our psychiatrists. I love you all. You do amazing jobs. But there are times where my husband can't turn off his psychiatrist brain and it's well, let's talk about what you're feeling. And I'm like, I don't want to.
Yes, totally. Oh my gosh. Yes, I'll just leave it at that. My poor husband sometimes too. Yep. So this is kind of the crux of some of these tools that we're going to talk through. So this is the little grid. So if you look through, there's two things that we want to attain. We want to attain mutual respect, or we want to attain and maintain mutual purpose. So mutual respect is just that dynamic and that relationship. And mutual purpose goes back to, what is our goal? What are our outcomes? What are our deliverables, right? So going back to that, axes on the modes, cooperativeness versus assertiveness. Cooperativeness, the relationship; assertiveness, how do we get this goal met? And so if there is a clear problem and you want to maintain mutual respect or create mutual respect, apologize for the role you play, right? If there is a misunderstanding, there's a contrasting strategy that we'll talk about. If there is a clear problem and you're aiming for mutual purpose, it's likely because roles, responsibilities, and goals aren't well defined. So we need to create mutual purpose. Versus similarly, if there's a misunderstanding, but we want to have mutual purpose, we want to use the contrasting. So we're going to get into that. But before we do that, I'm going to just give you guys a minute, and I'm going to put you into small teams to talk about in your small group a time when you received a really great apology and some of the characteristics of that, as well as the time that you received a terrible apology. And let's see, I'll just open up rooms automatically and go talk about these two questions: a time when you got a really genuine, great apology, and a time of not so great apology. And then we'll come back. Actually, hold on. I'm gonna do so that Vicky doesn't get shoved into a breakout room. Vicky, you do not have to enter a breakout room. All right, you should get an invitation here to join your breakout rooms. Oh man, all of our social workers paid attention and joined their room. I don't have to kick anybody out. I'm missing the hanger. Oh, Kate, hanger. I love it. How many more slides do I have, Jen? 20. All right.
Are you weak?
No, this gets me jazzed up.
Okay. I thought so.
Yeah, you'd be weak.
I'm weak for you.
Guess what I did? I signed up for Weight Watchers. Guess what I started yesterday? Weight Watchers. I only went 3 points over my daily allotment.
Right on.
Wow. Fruit is free. So.
All right, we'll do it.
I got to. If I ever have to wear pants again.
We can get behind that.
Yeah. Hey, Marta.
Sorry.
Hi, Marta.
How you feeling? Huh?
I'm good.
Good.
We see
Your husband better?
Yeah,
Symptoms
he
better?
was really only sick for like 12 hours.
Yeah. That's awesome to get
And
it. but
Joseph,
like hardly get it.
Joseph continues to have like a reactive airway cough and be negative.
How old is he?
He's 12 and
Okay.
recently boosted.
Interesting.
Right. So I'm like, I don't really know that you're negative, but whatever.
Right.
So
But he's probably been tested like what, 3 times?
So
weird.
we're just working on getting him an inhaler to calm his little airway down, but
Poor buddy.
we're good.
While I have both of you,
Mhm.
I wanted to let you know I have been emailing with Rebecca Martins.
Does she know what's going on?
About the billing situation. She just sent another email.
Because Pam emailed me and she's like, this is what I did. Was that okay? I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I told Rebecca that it seems like there's a lot of emails going around with a lot of different people. I don't really know who the key players are. And it seems like nobody really knows what Lend is or like what we do and why. So I asked if we thought if it would be good to get a meeting, and Rebecca thinks that this will be the solution, hopefully, with the modifier thing.
Hope so.
So we'll see. So to be continued.
Pam just emailed back, like she used that modifier, but it made her do something else. And she's like, I hope that was okay, but I couldn't put the modifier in without this code.
Okay.
So she said, Rebecca, like, is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because she had to put it, and she's like, it's the new visit CPT code that I had to put in. So that's obviously a high bill code.
Gotcha.
We'll see.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. And then, yeah, me and what's his face? Everett.
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
No.
I just don't understand why it's so hard. Like, literally, just
Linda,
listen, just when you see these MRNs come through, don't put a bill in. Why is it so hard? Why?
Listen.
Why is it gotta be so hard, Linda?
It's real hard.
Real hard.
Yeah,
Real
so
freaking hard.
To be continued.
To be continued. What?
Okay. I really came back to add the sign-in sheet again.
I did add it one more time.
Okay, then I'm done. They're fine. They're done.
Okay, you think? All right, I'm sure.
Are they
I think
issues?
Paul was on my Echo on Friday. I recognize Paul. Thanks for coming, Paul.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna bring everybody.
I'll leave you
back.
alone. Thank you.
Okay. Courtney, Paul, and Michelle were efficient. Coming back. I'll drop this link in the chat box one more time for the folks. Nope, you don't want to see my email. There we go. Nope, sure don't. That's a disaster. All right. Folks are starting to come back. Looks like we're all back, right? Yeah, there we go. All right. Anybody want to provide an example of what your group talked about for a really genuine apology?
I can share. In our group, we talked about it's not necessarily like the words that were said that stood out to us, but the actions that followed, and like, was it followed by behavior change or even just some problem solving of like, okay, well, what can I do better next time? And how should we move forward?
Excellent, right? That the behavior, the showing you the actions that follow it, right? Awesome. How about those less than perfect apologies? Examples that folks discussed?
Go ahead, Sam.
Our group discussed when people apologize and say like, I'm sorry that you feel, or I'm sorry that you were hurt, instead of like taking responsibility for like actually apologizing for what they did.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Elodie, go ahead.
Yeah, we had some few examples, but it was mostly like one-word sentences or anything that felt forced or something that didn't feel genuine and sincere. And as for the first one, I thought it was interesting to bring this up because we pinpoint a very good apology, and we were discussing whether it was because we don't seem as a society to remember the good ones, just the bad ones, and that when they're good, we often forgive and forget. So interesting.
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah. And just how that all goes back to, again, preschool. And there's some emerging literature that I'm interested in as I'm raising a 15-month-old about trying to, as adults, not force children to apologize just for the sake of apology. And really that's where the child development literature is going. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that or wants to add to it. I haven't dug super deep into it, but I'm like, yeah, like when you're just forcing the child to apologize just because you as the adult want to hold them accountable, it's not really teaching them the reasons that we apologize and kind of supporting the other person's emotions. Rather, it's just something to check off the box that they did. So we've learned some pretty poor approaches to taking accountability and responsibility for our actions as children.
Steph, just kind of going off of that, that's what I immediately thought about for the second question about like a less than perfect apology is like talking to my parents and trying to get them to apologize. And they can sometimes be stuck in that mode of like, I'm the parent, I'm the adult. And I realize like, I'm an adult too.
Yeah. You raised me up, guys. Your job is done.
Right.
Yes.
But just working through those unlearned behaviors through my parents.
Yes. So yes, we get stuck in those behavioral profiles that we've had throughout our lives, for sure. That start very young.
I feel like on the other end of that, like I say I'm sorry all the time, and it like sometimes I will say I'm sorry walking in the hallway, and I'm like I wasn't even near that person.
Right.
And
what am I sorry for? Yeah.
Right. I feel like it's such a bad habit. And then when I hear I'm sorry, I don't believe it as much because I know mine are so not valuable.
Yeah. Thank you. Paul, you have your hand up.
Yeah, one thing my group discussed was the I'm sorry, but.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, we just talked about how often a lot of times we hear people say that. And then also one piece that I talked about was like intention and impact. So like the difference between that. So like intending not to do whatever you did that you're apologizing for, but recognizing the impact of what you did and how that impacted that person. So that's one huge thing for me is impact and intention.
Perfect. Thank you. I did not even pay him to set me up for the next bit, but he did so beautifully. And so when we go into that contrasting, it's not apologizing, but it's doing what Paul was just describing. It's further clarifying the intention as opposed to how it landed for that person. So instead of, feeling like there may be a misunderstanding or miscommunication, and we want to make sure that person knows we respect them, or we want to make sure that person knows that we are, really working towards the same goals, we would use a contrasting statement. And it's not necessarily apologizing. So it's not Kelly jumping into, well, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. No, you're saying sorry is you're owning more of the problem than probably is needed. But rather clarifying to make sure what you've said or done doesn't hurt more than it should, but really putting your feedback into a context and bringing it, again, not that content, but that context. So it could be something like, I never meant to blank, or I don't want you to think blah, right? So you fill in these statements based on your responses to these questions. How might have that person taken my behavior? How might that have landed for them? And when I say landed, like that just means how might that person have experienced me in that moment? How might that other person feel disrespected, feel not valued, feel like they're not part of the team, right? All of these are things that we want to clarify and think through, like, okay, what did I not want to convey, but I accidentally may have? But rather than contrast that with, I do want to make sure that you're a valued member of this team. What I'm concerned about is us getting the job done, right? And then going straight back to that mutual purpose. What is our goal of the project? What is our goal of the case and working with this family? What is our goal of writing this grant, writing this manuscript, whatever it is you're working on? What is your real motivation? And also, it's okay to share, like, I really enjoy working with you, and I don't want you to think that I'm being disrespectful. That was not my intention at all, but I really am just passionate about getting this done by the timeline. So again, contrasting seems simple, very complicated, takes practice, because those that are worst at dialogue are likely those people that are not here in the LEND program, right? That we have to go out and train and support and be on teams with, because they're going to ignore the conflict. They're going to steamroll people with their opinions. And so with some of those situations, there's this other strategy that the authors in Crucial Conversations discuss, which is called the CRIB strategy. And it's using CRIB to create mutual purpose. So really, like, how do we get to a place of compromise? How do we work together on that? Really probably with a person who doesn't maybe see it your way, or is trying to steamroll, or you just feel like it's difficult to work with them. So it's, you know, you have this C. So all these are acronyms, right? So CRIB, and we'll talk about another one later. So C is commit to seek mutual purpose. So what is it? What is our common goal? So it seems like we're both trying to force our own opinions. What if we take a step back and think about some strategies that would work for both of us? Then recognize the purpose behind the strategy. So help me understand where you're coming from. What is that person's motivation is really what we want to inquire. Then I is really co-create or invent this mutual purpose. So how can we take what I want out of this project or out of this scenario and create an outcome that works for me, but then combine it with what you want out of this. So there may need to be longer term, larger scale goals that are discussed that everybody can agree on. And then the B is just brainstorming how we approach those new strategies and suggestions. So CRIB, you can change these to a different acronym, but CRIB is what the authors use. So commit, recognize, invent, and brainstorm. And honestly, this is just another way of talking about problem solving. There's different methods. I just feel like this one is nice because it's comprehensive and it comes along with the Crucial Conversations book. As we've kind of alluded to, it's not that you're going to be perfect at this. No one is perfect at it. But if you prepare a little, like we talked about when Jason was bringing up, like, okay, what do I do on the front end, right? Prepare a little. How am I going to say this? How might this come across? Get some coaching from a colleague, practice it. And a little progress can go a really long way. And remembering to always check in with your body. What is your body telling you? So again, we don't want to take things that aren't ours. So we try to understand that person's point of view, but not necessarily agree with it. And kind of like we've alluded to, not necessarily own accountability for their feelings. And this can be really challenging when we're empathic, helpful beings. So this is another strategy called the AMP strategy. And again, this is very simple. For some of you that have done counseling skills training, this is basic counseling skills. So you have your ask, so you invite others to share their thoughts and feelings. So it's just genuine, like, tell me what's happening, or I'm wondering how you're feeling right now. I'm starting to see you kind of pack your stuff up. I'm wondering if you know, what's happening. And I think what's most challenging that you will eventually, you've probably heard this growing up, you don't have to like everyone. You're not going to be best friends with everyone. What happens when you come across that person you just don't like? And I learned this my first year of grad school, where my very first patient was a very direct individual who was identified with narcissistic personality disorder. And oh my word, was it really challenging to just be in a room with him at first. Then my supervisor coached me. Think about that individual and all of the trauma he's experienced in his life. And can you find one positive thing about thinking about him when he, you know, what all he's gone through, what all he's survived, what all he's dealt with, and concentrate on that one positive thing. And that can really take you a long way when you're able to just pinpoint on the one thing that you can empathize with, that you can pull out like, oh, that's a really great skill that that person has, and focus on that, because you're gonna end up working with people that you don't like eventually, somewhere down the line. Maybe you are now, and maybe that's why you're here. But definitely asking, get the ball rolling. Then mirroring. This is so important. This is not rephrasing, or I'm sorry, this is not paraphrasing, because that will come next. This is just mirroring, making a statement that confirms their feelings. So I can really see your passion for this. Or calling them out where their nonverbals don't match, right? We see this sometimes in when I get close with a family in therapy, and it usually happens with moms, with women, where they might be really overwhelmed, but they're giggling. And I might just say, you know, you're saying this, that this is, you know, really scary for you, but you know, what's happening is it's kind of, you're laughing a little bit. And I'm just curious if we can dig into that a little bit more, so I can help figure out how to help you and your child. So some mirroring, and it really is, it's just that, it's being a mirror for that person. Then we would jump into the paraphrase. And so it's really important to validate or mirror first before we jump into a paraphrase, because this isn't necessarily just restating, but putting it into your words so you can make sure that person knows you're listening and you're trying to understand it from their perspective. So it could even just start with, you know, let me see if I'm understanding or picking up correctly what you're explaining. And then prime. And this may come because you're getting nowhere. Or this might be like, okay, tell me more about that. I'm really interested to hear more about how you're feeling. Just kind of keeps the conversation going. It's another ask, basically. So what I want us to do with the remaining time, oh good, it's only 2:30, yay, is to practice in groups of 3. So I'm going to take a moment to put you into some teams. And I'm going to try to mix up our, I'm going to make sure everybody can share screen, first of all. Yep, everybody can share screen. And I'm going to mix up our social work and clinical counseling friends with our LEN trainee friends. Because what I would like to do is for you all to look through the scenarios 1 through 6 on the Canvas site for today. So there's 6 scenarios ultimately, and I would love it if you guys as a group could just try to role play one. And even if it turns into, I know it's hard to role play on Zoom, even if it turns into a conversation about how you might approach this, or even just practicing some simple phrases and sharing those with each other, totally fine with me. But a couple of the scenarios will say at the top, this is for a practitioner, this is for a clinician, this is for any professional, this one is for a parent, this one can be for any non-clinical. So just kind of read through them and use this time to help answer questions from each other and try to role play if you can. It's so much easier to role play in the room together when I can coach and watch and do all that stuff. So do what you can. And I will be opening up these rooms in a moment. So for our LEN friends, if you could pull up these scenarios on Canvas, that would be amazing to share with our other folks. Almost there, everybody. Sorry. And you should be getting an invitation here in a moment. I'm just getting tired of teaching on Zoom.
I hear you.
Like, it's fine, but I don't like feel overly successful.
I get it.
I'm sure it's better than it is in my mind.
It's going great. People are interactive. It's just that we go differently.
I really am kind of glad that the social workers get to come back, because even just based on like Elizabeth, I feel like there's so much information that we pack into 1 year that if you get this material multiple times, then it's like really much more powerful.
Yeah, I sent her old report.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I was like, I know where that is.
I have that. Oh, that's so funny.
Oh, shoot.
I know. Yeah, I mean, I'll bring them back in like 10 minutes. There's not much you can get done in a role play in 10 minutes. Then I'll have 5 minutes to summarize.
We're gonna sing for them.
Was that you?
I said, are you gonna sing for them?
Summarize. Maybe. I'm gonna step away and go to the bathroom real quick, but I'll be back.
Okay.
I think Vivian's gonna come over and watch Easton for a minute tonight so I can run to work and grab some shit.
Oh my God, I love that.
And I was like, I don't need like a real babysitter. I just need like a Vivian.
Mm.
Yeah. Did
How
you
much gonna
decide
pay
on
her?
tomorrow so I can figure out what to do?
I don't know. I'm still up in the air.
Ugh. Just go. Everybody wears a mask.
Okay. If you're sure.
I feel like our seats, now that I've sat in the like Travis Steele seats,
Yeah.
we actually have way more space.
I know.
And like the way that they sit up, like we sit up higher than the sides do. So I'm glad we did that, because now I know not to choose different seats.
Yeah.
Like I like our seats, not just for the food part.
Oh, totally. What time is it?
6:30.
Oh, okay. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
None of that 8:30 bullshit.
God, no. Yeah, no.
And they're doing are they still doing the vaccine requirement? Okay.
Vaccine requirement and
And
masks.
masks. Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good.
I mean, if you get it, then you can just blame me.
I will.
I know. And hold a grudge forever.
Forever.
Forever. Oh, police activity, Burnett and Northern, exercise caution. It's all clear now. Nicole's kids drew pictures on her computer paper, so when she went to print something, there's like marker all over her paper.
They're funny.
I love it. Super funny.
Hey, did you get the email that I sent about the children's theater
I did.
clarification?
I did.
Okay. Because I got a weird, like, undeliverable message back. And I don't know what that means.
I got it.
Okay, cool. Well, Meg needs to pay attention.
You know that she made a video about autism and didn't like ask for any feedback except from Julia and Kristen?
Yeah.
You didn't know that?
I knew that as of
I didn't.
whenever we met about that ABA work group thing. I was like, oh. Huh. Oh, shoot.
these shares would come all back together. Actually, I don't need to share right yet. I like to see everyone's faces. One more group. We're waiting to get back. All right, now everybody's back. So how about we have time for two groups to kind of give a brief summary of how their role play went or what they discussed, what scenario they chose. So who wants to jump in first? James, you look down. Thank you for volunteering. I'm going to tap you.
All right. Well, we were a little hesitant with like how we were supposed to approach the role plays. We kind of talked through how we would approach it from the different perspectives of each people.
No worries. Sounds good.
The challenge that we were talking about that would come up in this situation is like figuring out what the respondent actually is trying to do with the project and the reasons why they may be taking on like more than they can handle, or if there are ways of figuring out how to best address that. And then Hattie had also mentioned that this could be like an age difference too between the different roles and just different perspectives on what expectations maybe in terms of what work you're supposed to do and what takes precedence over other things.
Great. So it sounds like you guys chose the scenario where there was a team project. Somebody doesn't seem to be pulling their weight, and we have to kind of address it and figure out what's happening under the scenes.
Situation number one.
Yeah, great. Awesome. So you feel like your group kind of talked through what could all be going on and some strategies for getting that respondent to kind of open up and feel safe sharing?
Yep.
Awesome. Great. One other group? Don't make me call on you like I had to, James.
I can share for my group.
Great. Go ahead, Kelsey.
We had number 5. It was about a mother who was considering getting her child I believe the mumps and measles and rubella vaccine.
MMR. Mm-hmm.
Yes, but she did not want to, or she had apprehensions because she thought that the vaccine would cause autism. And we were a person in basically in Lent, in the leadership education program at CCHMC. And we talked about we talked about our initial impressions from reading it and how we all kind of thought it was like, whoa, I need to take a step back and think about this and let my opinion settle to way below the surface. And then how we talked about the importance of building a rapport and, making sure that the mom felt comfortable talking with us and kind of getting that relationship strong. And then we talked about looking at it from the mother's perspective. And, I understand you're a parent, you want the best for your child. We want the best for your child too. And then moving on to education and educating not only on the benefits of vaccinations and how the specific article that she had been referring was not accurate, but also talking about what exactly a diagnosis means and how a diagnosis doesn't mean. One of the questions was, I don't want my child to get a diagnosis. I don't want to give the vaccine because my child will then get a diagnosis and then they'll do bad in school and they won't have friends. And so we kind of talked about the twofold education standpoint of no, a vaccine does not mean a diagnosis, but also a diagnosis does not mean doing poorly in school. A diagnosis does not mean having no friends. And so we talked a lot about the education standpoint too.
Awesome. So you guys chose very different scenario than James, and a lot of those scenarios are like what I call ripped from the headlines, like SVU style. These are things that have happened in my own experiences and other LEND faculty experiences and LEND trainees experiences. Our pediatrician friends are going to have that kind of conversation. Nicoletta's laughing, I think, because she's like, I've already had that. I probably had it this morning. And we have it right now for sure with COVID vaccine hesitancy and a lot of push to get our kiddos vaccinated. So that is going to continue. One of the other scenarios was, how do we address other people that use the R word? That was scenario 6. So I'm seeing some of the groups chose that one. That one is here to stay as well. We thought years ago we might kill it because the government got rid of the R word in all political documents and all federal documents in 2007. It is 2022. The R word not going anywhere, unfortunately. So some of those scenarios, if you didn't get a chance to read through them, go ahead and read through them and just kind of reflect on how you might go about those scenarios based on your discipline, your experiences, because you're going to face similar types of things. There's a couple in the middle. I think 2 and 3 or 3 and 4 are what do you do when you don't agree with your teammate about an intervention you might be doing with a child. This comes up, this can come up, and we always default back at Children's to, well, we provide evidence-based practices. But then here in LEND, we've also taught you guys how to think critically about what does the evidence show, and the evidence is predominantly been done with white people, right? So how do we even know if it works with other children? So nonetheless, hopefully everything's more sticky and muddy for you today than anything, and you're thinking really deeply on these things. So just to summarize and close this up, as a reminder, if you're inviting others honest responsive, check yourself for defensiveness. We don't want to punish other people's honesty by appearing punitive or unwilling. And I think about this too, as a couple of us are preparing to go into a legislative meeting. And Shannon and Angel are going to go with me to talk to a legislator that I don't agree with a piece of legislation he proposed. I'm going to really have to check myself for the way my body feels, because I'm going to get real frustrated with him. But we're going to work on it together and dealing with those difficult, passionate emotions, because this will come up a lot. And then I think the main thing, going back to what we learned in kindergarten, is to take a nap every afternoon. As you may have heard my son just waking up in the room down the hall from his nap. Wouldn't that be nice? We want to take a break. We want to document. And I like this. Who will do what, by when, and how will we, as a group, as a pair, as a dyad, follow up? Right? We both take responsibility. We as a group take responsibility. But after an emotionally charged conversation, you're going to forget. You're going to forget. So it's so important to write it down. Whether you summarize in an email, whether you write it down on a piece of paper and handwriting it out can help commit it to memory. But you have to write it down, because as soon as you back away out of that heavy emotional confrontation or situation, you're going to release. And all of that adrenaline is going to be released, and you're going to forget what you talked about. So make sure you document. And just in closing, all you really need to know, you learned in kindergarten, there's never only one right way to do this. And when we think about crucial conversations and going back to the word conversations, it comes from the root word, the Latin root word for conversare, which means to live in a place or to dwell with. So please always take away from this that it's not a one-time thing. Conversations aren't a one-time thing, but rather a multiple iterations and a building of relationships. And I just want to end with these quotes. The best predictor of your ability to get to dialogue is the amount of curiosity you bring to the conversation. And then be more interested than afraid, or be more curious than afraid is kind of the way I like to change it. So thank you all for your participation.